Hello, welcome to Kindness in Business, the podcast where we explore the power of compassion and empathy in the business world. My name is Sonia Gonzalez Guillonneau, and I'll be your host. Today's special guest is Neil Bhuiyan. With 10 plus years in tech sales, Neil has trained 2,000 plus SDRs, helped drive 16 million in new business, and specializes in boosting confidence, prospecting skills, and performance. He's the founder of happyselling.io. He's also a coach at mysalescoach.com, and he's a host at the SDR Disco Call podcast. Outside of work, he's a proud dad, autism advocate, MC, and Spider-Man fan. Welcome, Neil. Very happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Sonia. That was a beautiful intro. I want to say thank you very much for having me on your show. And also thank you to your listeners for locking in for today. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you. And one of the reasons I brought you in, Neil, is that we actually met over 4 years ago at the SAS Leeds anniversary party. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah, I do.
And then we've met throughout the years at multiple events. And you're one of these people that is always approachable.
Thank you.
Is always up for a chat, for a hug.
Yeah.
And that has a smile on his face. And that's always welcome, especially when you're a little bit of an anxious person, to find that person that you feel kind of safe with.
Thank you.
I remember at the last event I saw you was Sales Confidence book launch for James, and we were sitting together while they were doing all of these speeches, and it was just really nice to see you on that very short trip to London. So very happy that you're here.
And I'm glad to be here. And to say to everyone, Sonia is a superstar and definitely somebody who is approachable, friendly, always has time of day for anyone. So I'm privileged to be here talking today, and I'm privileged to know you as well, Sonia. So thank you.
No, thank you. And you definitely didn't have to say that, so I appreciate it. But the first question I want to ask you, Neil, people know you as your job title. They know a little bit about what you do through LinkedIn because you're quite an avid poster. But who are you beyond work? What's your journey look like so far?
That's a very good question. Typical sales response. And there's a lot of different sides to me, right? So obviously there's a lot of stuff people see on LinkedIn. So primarily like a sales coach, a sales trainer. But beyond LinkedIn and the world of sales, first and foremost, my name's Neil. I'm a guy from South London, born and bred here, living in the UK. I'm the youngest sibling, and I've got a big sister, and I love my mum and dad, and shouts my niece and my little boy, to which I am also a father, which is my most joyous experience and journey of life to date. And I kind of say it is my job, and it's the number one job that I love. And they always say you have to love what you do, right? Outside of that, I also have a creative side where I'm a musician or a rapper and an MC, and I have been that for the last 30 years. And most recently, I've been sharing more of my musical side on LinkedIn, which does help break the ice in coaching sessions that I have. And I've also found out there's a lot of other musicians out in the sales world, which has helped me connect with others. But in terms of my passions and hobbies and what I love doing, I'm a big advocate for health, mental health specifically. So I'm a big advocate for, therapy, mindset, etc. I love going down to the gym, working out. For context, last year, I was hit in a really bad position of having pneumonia, and I was out of work for a month, but so it put a lot of life into perspective. And as it stands today, I am 128 days free from any alcohol and living my best life. So that's me to a T.
Thank you for sharing, and it warms my heart to hear about your experience. But also, I think one thing that you've mentioned, which is really important, is that we don't stop bettering ourselves, right? There's always something that we can do. There's always something that we can improve. And that's also part of that kindness piece of being kind to yourself, right? Because if you're not being kind to yourself, then it's going to be very difficult for you to be your best and to be kind to others as well, right?
100%. And, I used to have this thought of, there's this saying like being the best version of yourself. And that's something that I used to want to strive to, Sonia. But after listening to a whole load of podcasts, doing a lot of meditation, and meeting other people that have been on their journey, I've tried to remove that from my own kind of mindset of being the best version of yourself. And the reason I've come to that conclusion is we keep trying to strive to this perfection model of a person and human being within our head. But then the question begs, when you get to that point, then what, right?
And perfection doesn't really exist, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
There's an illusion in our heads.
100%. So kind of the mindset is just, am I good enough for today? And am I happy and content with where I am? That's the mark of success for me in my head. So I know, who I was 10 years ago is completely different to who I am today. And I know who I'm going to be in 10 years' time is going to be completely different to who I am today. So there's no point of trying to get to the end goal or the end journey of being that best version, but it's the journey that I'm more interested in. But yes, I think going through that journey yourself, that's when you can recognize people on their journeys where they may be going through a tough time. And I've had a lot of, I've said this on other podcasts, I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, which I'm happy to share because I think sharing those stories of survival is what helps inspire the others. But it's others that I'm able to connect with and empathize with, show kindness, and empathy towards them. So yeah, this is the version of myself I'm happy with today.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And I think, I fully agree with you. There isn't a perfect version of ourselves that we'll ever reach because life is continuously evolving, we're continuously evolving, our priorities in life change. But it is about realizing the things that you want to change and taking action to change those things and to be intentional about it. I really like the book Atomic Habits, which, talks about that 1% and the impact of that at the end of the journey. I think is super important. And also realizing that not every day you're going to be able to give 100%, and that's okay. If some days you can give 50, then giving 50 is what best for that day looks like, right? And taking each day as it comes is super important.
100%. And I think just to add on to that, I agree with, that 1%, by taking those actions every day, they compound over time. And that's where I feel the growth happens, right? So again, I'm never in competition with other people, other trainers, coaches, musicians, rappers. I'm not, right? I'm in competition with myself. I want to better myself. And if I consistently do that, then over time I will improve and get to places that I want to get to. But I always take stock of how far I've come. And that's a key thing that I do in my life. I just always look back and think, oh, cool, I remember I did this, I achieved that, I got to meet Sonia, I got to go there, I got to go to Sales Confidence. Even with that event, there were so many things telling me I don't want to go. Truthfully honest, I'm not a fan of going to sales leadership events because that's not my bag. Or ICP, and sometimes I find it a little bit boring. But I love going to SDR events because those are my people that I work with and I coach. I want to go more there. But Sonia, there were so many things in that day where I've been working, I've been coaching, I've been doing this, I've been doing going to another event, but I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I got to meet you. I got to see you in real life and give you that hug, right? The point being that, taking those things, and where you said some days may not be great and you may just give 50%, but I think also to take that a step further, that 50% of that day was 100% of what you can give. So don't beat yourself up if you can't do it high level or high performance every day. We're human, we're not machines, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just reminded me of this quote that I really like that says, not every day is good, but there is something good in every day.
Yeah,
right?
Love that.
Finding that good thing is what enables us to move forward. And again, going on the vulnerable topic, when I was at my darkest point when I was 17 and struggling with depression and ended up overcoming that, it was a lot of mindset, it was a lot of habit changing, it was a lot of changing how I viewed myself and the world. But at the same time, it was clinging on to those good things that happened every day when, times were dark and things didn't seem good. And little by little, the more you start appreciating, the more you start being grateful, the more you start looking at what you've got rather than what you don't have, your life starts changing then. And once you've appreciated those hard times, because I do always say those things happened for me and not to me, have enabled me to be who I am today and to help others and to realize that, every single person is fighting their own battles. Every single person you work with, your friends, your family, whether you're aware of them or not, that's a different story.
100%. And I think I love that. And thank you for sharing and being open and vulnerable with it as well. Because, again, my teens, I had a big bout of depression. I didn't recognize it till it was pointed out to me by a therapist and doctors with medication and stuff like that. And you ask yourself the question, why am I not normal, right? And it's not the case, right? I've done a lot of work on myself through therapy, and again, big advocate for therapy. And you don't have to go to therapy just because you're broken. People who go to therapy are still in a good mindset. They're a healthy mindset, but they do it to keep themselves accountable, to keep them on track, right? But I think, like, going through those things, I love how you said, they didn't happen to you, but they happened for you, right? And I've gone through myself a lot of challenging moments in life. And sometimes when I speak to my therapist, he just says, no, I don't know anybody that has the amount that you have going on in a short succession. I'm like, it's part of my life. It's making me who I am. And again, I'm not, as I've said to you in the past, I'm not a big reader of books, specifically sales books, but there are a couple of books in my life that have come into it at the right time. And one of them was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And in short, somebody who was a prisoner in Auschwitz and going through the Holocaust, right? Guy got disconnected from his wife and his daughter, didn't even know if they were alive with the Nazis. But what he saw was in the concentration camps, not how dark the Nazi soldiers were, but the prisoners, and to the points of lowest hell that these people had gone in. It completely changes people. But coming out the other end of it, he kind of says this thing of bad things will happen to us. But the question you want to ask yourself, are you worthy of your suffering? Because that suffering is what transforms you to come out the other side and, show more compassion and love towards people. And again, you never know what people are going through. But I think those things, similar to yourself, have what shaped us as to who we are as individuals to then help other people. So the other side of it is, and I did this in a coaching session with somebody yesterday where their mind wasn't in a great place, and they said they've got some personal stuff going on and they've got some work stuff going on, and they said to me, where should we start? And I said, well, from what I've learned, person, is if we're not cool with our personal stuff, that impacts our work stuff. So why don't we start with the personal stuff first? And this person was just going through a myriad of different challenges popping up in their life, and I just felt love for them, just like you're on your own and you can't talk to people at work about this sort of stuff. So yeah, use this as a safe space and we can talk about it. And again, I'm not going to share exactly what they said, but the point we got to was, I said to this person, have you ever heard of confirmation bias? And they were like, no. And I said, basically, it's your brain searching for certain things within your day and within your life, but it's dependent on how your mindset is from the morning. So, Sonia, for example, you wake up in the morning and you stub your toe on the bed and you're like, oh, that really hurts. And you automatically say to yourself, today's going to be a bad day. So you then go downstairs into the kitchen, your family are there, your partner then says, oh, why are you wearing that? And initially you think, what's their problem? What's wrong with this top that I've got on? It's something I picked out. And you're in a bit of a gripe with them. You then head out onto the road to head to work, and then you hit into a block of traffic and you think, right, the world is against me today. I need to get to work, and you're getting stressed and more wound up, right? And then you get into work and you're sitting at your laptop. All of a sudden, a manager or a co-worker messages, hey, Sonia, can we have a chat? And the initial thought you have is, oh no, what have I done wrong now? And that started from that first moment when you wake up, and it spiraled. But if we flip the script for a minute and let's restart that day. You wake up in the morning and you look outside the window and you see it's a sunny day already, and it just looks fresh, like a summer view. And you think to yourself, wow, that looks really beautiful. Today's going to be a good day. Is what you've said to yourself. You go downstairs into the kitchen, your partner says, why are you wearing that top? And you say, oh, it's something I haven't been able to fit into ages and I wanted to wear it today and it's making me feel good. Then you get out into work, you're traveling into work in the car, and you're still hit with that same traffic. And you're just thinking to yourself, well, do you know what? It gives me some extra time to listen to my favourite song. And as you drive along, you've seen a car that's been hit and had an accident. And you say to yourself, thank God that wasn't me. Perhaps the reason I'm late is because that happened and it stopped me from that happening to me. You then get into work and you're at your laptop, you're in a really good mood because you heard your favourite song just before you walked in, the one that gets you hyped up. And then your co-worker messages you saying, hey, Sonia, can we have a chat? And you think, I wonder what good news they've got for me. Maybe it's about that project I've been working on, and perhaps, or maybe it's that time for the appraisal and promotion. So confirmation bias is looking for things in your day, whether it's, the clouds or the glimmers. And I try to start every day with a moment of, here's a new day, here's a new opportunity. One thing I'm very grateful is I woke up alive. Not many people have that privilege, right? So again, I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but it's with the mindset, it's how you start the day. And some people may say this is wishy-washy and affirmations and gratitude, but I tell you what, 15 years of my career doing tech sales, the first book I ever bought was The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. And I remember going into my first tech sales job office, and I remember a lady on the other side who's my team, I'm not going to mention her name, but she said, what's that? And I said, oh, it's called The Secret. And she said, what's that? And I said, how about this? Read one page, and if you don't like it, give it back to me. And, a day later, she goes, yeah, this isn't for me. This is wishy-washy. But I read that every day on the morning to work, and I read the other 6 books thereafter. Hit target, got promotions, became SDR manager, helped a team hit 3.5 million. Was it the book? Probably not. But it was what I was feeding my mind in the morning that I think came with the mindset. So, yeah.
I love that book. I love what you've just said, and I 100% agree. I think there are some key books that have made me lean into that mindset and mentality. And whether or not you believe in law of attraction, whether or not you believe in manifestation, it doesn't really matter whether or not you believe. Is about what your mindset tells you, what actions are you willing to put in place in order to get there. And not just that, but the more times you attempt to do things, the more times you fail, the more times you're going to succeed at something too, right?
Yeah.
And that's a harsh reality that a lot of people aren't willing to accept because they're just not willing to risk it at all. And the thing is, in life, sometimes you have to take risk. You have to jump in, kind of trust that the universe, that faith, whatever it is that you believe in, is just going to have your back. Funnily enough, there is a book, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called The Universe Has Your Back by Gabriel
No.
Bernstein. It says how to feel safe and trust your life no matter what. And it's all about acceptance, surrender, and kind of letting go of our need of control, which ultimately we don't have.
Yeah. And do you know what? I think, like, recently I've been going through a bit of a gripey time on a personal level. And what I realized is I really thrive in structure and routine and knowing where I stand with things, whether it's in work or business life. And there was a lot of chaos that I was dealing with. And the reason I was spiraling was I was trying to grasp and gain control of certain aspects. And I had to have kind of like a rude awakening of, Neil, like, you are making yourself ill because you're stressing on things that you cannot control. So, I went through like 3 weeks of like being depressed. Like, I was showing up to work and I was online on Zooms and doing all of that stuff. But when the Zoom ended, I was a miserable pile of just sadness, right? I didn't want to catch up with my friends. I didn't want to go to the gym. I didn't want to, talk to my besties and stuff. I just wanted to numb and just chill and watch Netflix or just listen to music. But then I think we go through that in peaks and troughs, right? I kind of get to a point where I get fed up of being depressed. That's how it works with Neil. Like, he's on a high, and then when I hit a low, it's low. But I then get to a point, I say to myself, do you know what? You need to ride it out. You just need to, like, when people say, Neil, are you all right? I'm like, no, but I will be okay. I know in a couple of days things are going to be cool. And then I hit that point and then something snaps in my head. I'm like, all right, cool, done with this. Let's get back up and go through that. But yeah, like, we as people are very complex beings, and I don't think we're fully understood in terms of how our brain works. Like, yes, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of theory and stuff like that. But for me, Sonia, with life and stuff that comes into it, is I'm a practitioner. Right, I can read a lot of stuff, I can watch a lot of stuff, but I'm more somebody who kinesthetically learns by actually doing and taking action on stuff. And I loved what you said about failure. That is what I say, FAIL, fail is first attempt in learning. And even with SDRs that I'm working with, there's this thing of just wanting to get that first email logged, or having that great opener on a call. Or, we see it a lot on LinkedIn, like, here's this template. And I'm like, you're so much focused on the actual tool, or, the solution or the blueprint, you forget about, well, do you want to have a chat with that prospect or have a human interaction? Do you want to see if you're able to build that rapport with somebody? Are you happy to see that somebody chose to work with you and continue working with you? And if you got off that cold call and it didn't, end in booking a meeting, cool, so what? You spoke to another human being that you've never spoken to before. You built a little bit of a relationship, and now somebody knows you exist I think that's the bit I'm more happy to focus on. But I equally understand I had to go through that journey, so I can't put that expectation on the people that I'm working with, that you have to think like Neil thinks. So I'm more interested to see, how do other people think? So I think what I'm a big fan of, like what you said outside of sales, I study people. I love studying how people tick and think and work, whether it's in sales or a founder building a company or somebody running their first podcast as well. I love seeing that journey bit, and it's the same with music. I look up to a lot of rappers, but I love to know what was their journey and story to getting there. And I think it's within that journey. So, and that's the thing, like with your prospects, whenever I have a discovery call, I go check them out on LinkedIn before and I'll say, hey, Sonia, like, I see that you worked here and there. Like, oh, I saw you worked at Sassely's. Like, how did you get to the SDR coach? That is interesting for me. So I think being interested in people and studying people will help you reflect upon yourself as to what things do you want to work on, right? You don't have to be like them, but what could you work on? So with me, granted, I'm a founder of my own company, and yes, I've been an account executive, but I'm not really good at closing. I hate it. I find it the most boring bit, and negotiating, like, I'm more interested in like the prospecting bit at the beginning to see if I can get that person's interest. And then I'm more interested to see, that kickoff call or having that QBR review call with them to like say, hey, we've been on this journey together. Like, what do you think? Like, what things should we update and what should be? That for me is what I love. And I'm kind of bringing this back to sales. I know I've gone off on a completely different tangent, but that's what happens when you bring me on a podcast, right? Like, I love seeing the journey, seeing how people bring things about how they build things. How do they take an ideation from their mind and bring it into reality? So I think like in the world of sales, there is always this debate. Is it an art? Is it a performance? Is it a science? And I said, but it's so much more, right? And I think within this industry, why I love working here is I get to meet new people. That's one of the reasons I got into sales. Like, I wanted to get out of my hometown and just my social circle that I knew then. And, when I speak to my friends and family, I'm like, yeah, I spoke to a CEO. Or guess what? Neil has been approached by, and this is some news for your audience, nobody else knows this yet, but I got approached by Forbes Business Council.
Nice.
And they want to like put me like into one of their publications. And dude, when I got that email, firstly, I thought it was a scam, but then I verified it, and it's somebody who's a contributor and editor to them. And he said, we want to feature you. And like he put in a bio of who I was. And I looked at it and I was like, rah. Like, one thing I've never had been is like a top voice on LinkedIn. And, there's a bit of my ego saying, I wish I could have that. But I'm like, cool, just crack on with what you're doing, Neil. But when Forbes hollered, I was like, oh my God, but that's different. And I kind of said, like, I went to my parents and they were like, what is this? Because they don't know. This is not their world. And I said, But I kind of like brought it to this like penultimate thing for me, which was like, I've been posting online about happy selling for 7 years. No agency, no big marketing team, like yourself, one man person or one person company, right? And for somebody in the business world to see that, it wasn't so much validation, but it was just recognition. I'm doing something which is helping somebody. And that's my quota to success. Like, I don't want to go viral or have hundreds of thousands. Like, I don't give a damn about that stuff. But if I can make a difference to one person's day and help them see something in a different way, or help them tweak their mindset or take a different perspective, as we learn from other people and books and videos and things that we watch, it makes an impact. If I can do that for one person, and I've done it consistently for 7 years, that they go and holler. And as you mentioned, my company is called happyselling.io. What some people are not aware of is the .io stands for coding language of input output, right? So the reason it's called happyselling.io is because it's happy selling in, and the output is happy selling. That's what I want to do and achieve. And I can see the smile coming, and that's it. I want to create a world of happy sellers, one smile at a time. That's kind of the goal and mission for me. But yeah, sorry for going off on a tangent there, but you got me going.
Don't apologise at all. And firstly, massive well done. I think, it is a massive achievement. I'm super proud of you. And I think you should be super proud of yourself. But the other thing is, you said that you want to make an impact to one person, and that you've made an impact to thousands of people already, right?
Thank you.
Don't ever underestimate that. Don't ever forget that. And yes, getting recognition from a huge brand in the business world is super amazing. But the recognition that you get in your day-to-day from your coaching, from the work that you do with your peers, with other coaches, even the work that you do on LinkedIn with your little boy, all of that creates an impact as well, right? And I think as salespeople, we're often harsh on ourselves. We're often looking at the next thing and what can we accomplish next. But as you mentioned earlier, right, looking on our past achievements, looking at the journeys, a lot more important, because where we are right now doesn't remove everything that we've gone through.
Yeah, 100%.
No, thank you for sharing. I have one question for you that I want to ask in the kindness in business portion, and then we'll continue a little bit more with the sales development. But what misconceptions do you think people have about kindness in a business context?
Well, I think with what misconceptions, it's subjective to anybody kind of that hears that statement. So I can kind of say like what it means for me and how I can kind of perceive it with, okay, so I'm not really good at explaining things, but I'm really good at telling stories, right? That's something I am good at. So if I go back to my SDR days, I remember when I was first an SDR, I was Like I was processing 800 inbound leads a week as one SDR for the whole of EMEA because there was only just me, right? So all of those inbound leads, imagine I get into the office at 7 a.m. and because my manager and like main team were out in California, I would start at 7 and then it'd get to 3 o'clock and they would wake up and then these flux of leads would come in. And this isn't healthy and I don't recommend it, but I was doing it back then. I was working till 11 p.m. before I left Covent Garden to come back home. And then I did that again. And I did that for 6 months. And it wasn't until my manager said, Neil, what the hell are you doing? Because she didn't know, because she's remote. I said, I just thought it was normal. It's my job. I thought that's what I had to do. Otherwise I'm going to get fired. She's like, no, you fool. Like, but yeah, I learned the hard way. But yeah, the other thing was every lead that came in, it would trying to give them the best service that I can. So I found out that I was talking to leads that weren't in our ICP. I was giving consultancy advice for people that weren't fit and where they could look, sending them articles, sending them publications, introducing them to people. And a lot of my AEs at the time were like, Neil, like, you need to let go. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, like, you're just being too nice to all of these people. Like, if they're not a fit, they're not in the ICP, qualify them out, move on to the next one. We're here to do that. And now being in sales for long, I get that, right? But there was this part of me was just like, I want to help, because my job back then at Zora was to find high growth companies that were looking to pivot, launch or scale a subscription business and go into what we call the subscription economy. So I wasn't really an SDR saying, hey, this is our platform, this is what we do. I was selling a vision that my CEO was talking about. Like the vision was, we're moving away from Blockbuster to Netflix. We're moving away from Apple iTunes, 99 cents per song, to Spotify subscriptions. The world was a huge thing changing. And I saw myself as being the European salesperson or consultant telling these businesses and founders and COOs and CEOs like how you make a subscription business. So I was very much giving a lot of my time, but I was putting too much of my energy into things which weren't going to translate into revenue. Fair. But I enjoyed it. And what the funny thing happened was a lot of these leads had to go away and then come back a year later. But then they would come to me and say, Neil, we've just raised X amount. We're now generating 25 million in ARR, we now want to talk. And I'd always have people like sending me referrals and leads, and like people would DM me on LinkedIn and said, oh, you spoke to this company, White Moon, and now they're telling us we should be speaking to you. So the impact of me being kind was bringing in that revenue. And, years later, there's a shout out to Pete Tomlinson, the CEO of Windsor Telecom. I think this was back in 2022 when I was an SDR manager for a company called Happio. I think it was Aircall that put out a post of what inspiring sales leaders have you worked with or in the world of prospecting. And Pete Tomlinson, the CEO, commented on the post for an upcoming webinar saying you should get Neil Bhuiyan. But he wrote on the LinkedIn post, I met this guy 10 years ago and he was the nicest business rep I ever met. He was super helpful. Granted, we didn't close as a customer, but he's somebody I've been following on LinkedIn for 10 years. And I hadn't spoken to Pete for 10 years. But for somebody to remember me from that time ago and recommend me, and the end result was I went on to that webinar, I got to deliver it, and that was really cool, and that helped with my brand and stuff. So going back to that you said you're being too kind and nice. I get it. So it's balancing the kindness and making sure that you don't burn yourself out trying to help other people. And for somebody who has previously been, and I'm still working on it, being a people pleaser, there's a thing of like, I can't remember, I hope I don't get this wrong, is like, be kind, not nice, right? And in terms of Mr. Nice Guy is doing everything, taking crap thrown at them and just being cut out for stuff and, and you're always going to be Mr. Nice Guy. Like, you can be kind, but you can have boundaries, right? So I've really been working on setting boundaries. Like, I will not respond to any emails, calls and messages after 12 o'clock on a Friday because that is my time, either for myself or for my son. If I get asked to assign to projects and I don't feel that it's going to balance with my work and my life, I'll be like, no, I'm not doing it. And some people are like, well, come on, Neil, like, why aren't you doing this? And I said, and I don't have to over-explain myself. I can just say, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. And being comfortable with that. And similarly, like with friends and family, hey Neil, and this kind of relates to my music life. I'm growing my music brand, and then I've had people reach out to me that I haven't spoken to in 10 to 20 years and say, hey Neil, man, I'm seeing your stuff on TikTok, on Facebook and Instagram, like things are popping, man. I would love to come to one of your shows. Like, can you get us guest lists? Can you get us tickets? And I just respond to them and said, where have you been for the last 10 years? You haven't come to any of my gigs, shows, you haven't posted any of my music content. And this isn't coming from a place of bitterness, but it's recognizing my worth and being not arrogant, but confident in, I will go give the tickets to my friends that have been coming to my shows. I will get guest lists and I'll get them drinks. And recently on LinkedIn, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, Neil, and it's somebody that I knew from my business life and at one point did work with. And they said, oh, I've been loving your content on LinkedIn. We're doing this now. We'd love to have a chat with you. And I just looked at it and I was like, you love my stuff on LinkedIn, but you haven't liked, comment, shared, or posted anything, and you're now private DMing me, asking me to help you with your business. And rather than being, nasty, I just didn't reply. That's me being kind. I don't have to be overly nice and please people. And maybe your listeners are looking at me like, all right, Neil, you was really nice at the beginning, but there's this side to you. But I've had to build this side of me. And, it's something I've done within my therapy sessions where we have something called like the shadow version of ourselves, the shadow self. So the shadow is the person who doubt your own voice saying, oh, you can't do this, or, like, why are they getting that? It's the bitterness, it's the anger and the rage within you. And that version of me used to live in my early 20s, right? And I've really worked hard to try and suppress my shadow self. But by doing so, it caused problems because I was on this pendulum of going from one extreme to the other. But your shadow is the part of yourself which can also protect yourself so that when people cross boundaries or if they do something unethical to you, it's that part of yourself which protects. And that now comes out into me with my boundaries. So sounds really weird, like a split personality, because it is. It's like we have different elements to us. But my shadow is what protects me, my mental health, my boundaries, my life, and me. And it ensures I can be, kind to people, but I don't have to be overly nice.
I relate to that a lot. I understand where you're coming from. And I think like building your own boundaries comes with understanding yourself and understanding what you're willing to do and not. But at the same time, it also comes from being taken advantage. Because of that niceness, it comes from, people having a misconception of who you are because of the way you show up. And like the way I always put it is I will treat others in the way I want to be treated. But at the same time, if you don't treat me nicely, I'm not going to be overly nice to you. I will be kind. I will be respectful. I will, be a good person because that's something I strive to be every single day. But I'm not going to be fake, right? And I think that's something that comes up a lot and something that actually I came across a lot in the UK where the culture is a lot of like, let's all be friends and then like speak to each other badly behind their back. And I hated that, honestly. Like, if I have a problem with someone, I'd much rather have a conversation over a coffee and address it, even if we agree to disagree and just respect each other's opinions, than be gossiping behind someone's back. Anyway. I have one question for you on the AI and sales development piece before we go into the round fire, which is, where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI to enhance rather than replace human connection in sales?
Good question. So let me preface this by saying, like, AI, predominantly it's like ChatGPT is the main thing people look upon, and you got Claude and, all of that sort of stuff. Like, AI has been around a hell of a lot longer than most people think or know. Because if we go back maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago, Salesforce was one of the first AIs with Einstein, and it was helping with guided selling. And in terms of, if you think about other tools, such as Grammarly, which helps you with your speech and punctuation and grammar, we've been using a lot of tools unknowingly that already have elements of AI or the precursors to AI. And for somebody that's been in software or SaaS for like nearly 15, 20 years, software is what I geek out on. I've come from days of like, when I went to college, it was learning how to do programming with Visual Basic. Like in my early days, when I was like a 6-year-old kid, my dad had an IBM 486 PC and I didn't play in Windows, I played in MS-DOS. So I geek out, and this is the other side of Neil, I geek out on tech, right? So whenever software comes about, any new tool or solution, I geek out. I want to learn about, like, even with what we're using today, Riverside. Eat the hell out of this when I found out Gary Vaynerchuk was using it. And I was like, oh, I want to know how this works. So, I want to know the back end and all of that sort of stuff. Granted, I'm not a CTO or coder or anything like that, but enough to understand the basics of it is really important. And also, shouts out to SDRs, like learning things about APIs and how do they work. And when somebody once said to me, what is an API? I was like, I don't know. So I went to go speak to our CTO. I said, what is an API? And he said, imagine if you've got two languages and in the middle you've got like a bridge which helps you translate to connect one bit of software to the other. That's what an API is. Like, oh, cool, great. And then he said, you've got bidirectional and, different types of APIs. And I was like, cool. So SDRs, you don't have to go too tech, but understand the basics of software, because if you can do that, it will help you out in the long run when it comes to product knowledge, etc. Yeah. Anyway, coming back to the AI bit, I jumped onto ChatGPT when it first came about, when OpenAI hit. And I was like, wow. But what I was hoping for was the virtual reality of, wearing goggles and Ready Player One. That's the life I'm really looking forward to, right? Because the funny thing was, when I worked for a company called Showpad, we had a sales enablement platform. And I remember speaking to Louis and PJ, and this was 2016, and we had what they call digital sales rooms. So, like an environment where you can put your presentation and stuff. And I remember sitting to PJ in Ghent in Belgium, and I said to him, imagine, dude, if one day the digital sales room is you put on a headset, like a VR headset, and you're talking to business people and he laughed at me. He was like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, Neil, that's a bit crazy. But then we saw with Apple Vision Pro, that is happening today. When I saw Ben Francis, from the founder of Gymshark, again, another guy that I really look up to. I wouldn't say I idolize Ben because I love his story. I sent the screenshot and video to PJ and Lou. I said, told you. It's going to happen, right? So coming to the AI piece, it's about enhancing what we can already do as people or as salespeople. I think relying on a piece of software to do the job and not do anything in it, I think is soulless, right? So for me, I heavily use ChatGPT, but it's not just in sales. So like, for example, I will do in my own business in Happy Selling, I do discovery calls with prospects. I will use something called Fathom, which is my note taker, which has an element of AI, which helps summarize and do the notes. But I then take the transcript and then I put that into ChatGPT and I said, act as a sales coach and grade me and give me feedback on what's good and what's not good. Because the other point of it I've learned is self-awareness is not just recognizing what you're good at. Sorry, no, let me take a step back. It's just recognizing what you're not good at. That's not self-awareness. Self-awareness is knowing what you're good and bad at or what you need to improve. So I always ask, how well did I do on that call? What things were I talking about too much? Or, what could I be stronger on? So when it comes to like sales emails, if you're just expecting to create a sequence and cadence of templates where you've not put your heart and soul and thought into this, those templates and emails probably won't land, So AI takes what you've already done and it improves it and enhances it. So same way with my LinkedIn posts, 90% of my LinkedIn posts are helped by ChatGPT. So what I typically do is I open up Google Docs, I have my microphone and I just chat what I want to say. Then Grammarly then puts in the grammar and punctuation, everything. I then put it into ChatGPT and say, review this post and give me your honest thoughts and opinion. And it says, great story, really authentic, and it's more your style. Here's some room for improvement, such as flow, etc. So, I do that when I'm scheduling my posts using ChatGPT for content creation with podcasts and everything, like even what we're using today with Riverside. This has AI in it. It's freaking amazing.
Oh, it's so
right?
good. Saves
Yeah.
hours of editing.
Indeed. So, taking it with my content and, with my coaching and what I'm doing, it enhances me because I'm already here. I am the basis, I'm the source code of the language. But then I put it into something which is refined with a lot of data, a lot of fast critical thinking that perhaps I cannot do, which could take me years to do, right? So coming back to this AI, like where do I see it going? It's the same as software. And here's the funny thing that I find hilarious for those that are working in tech, and this is my ego coming out a little bit, right, Sonia? When people complain, people are using ChatGPT and is AI taking over our jobs? And I'm like, you do know you work for a software company that automates jobs for people. You provide a billing system that reduces the amount of people in the finance team to have to do those manual jobs and tasks and spreadsheets. That's what AI, OpenAI and ChatGPT are doing. It's just another bit of software. So why be intimidated by it? Because you're selling a bit of software as well that may reduce somebody's headcount within their business, may save them hours on a lot of manual tasks. It's the same thing. But, I think my reasoning comes from working in software and tech for so many years and because of that passion for it. So, a lot of things I see on LinkedIn posts, which I don't engage with because I'm just like, it's a perspective and it's an opinion, but our AI SDR is going to take over the market and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, here's the funny thing. When I was calling my insurance company the other day, I was speaking to an AI bot. It was asking me details and questions. And midway through the call, I said, is this an AI bot? So it's speaking to me on the phone. And it said, yes, I am an AI bot. If you would like to speak to a real human, please let me know. And I said, no, I'm all right. I had no problem interacting with that, because same way with ChatGPT, sometimes if I'm in a low mood, and stuff like that, I will speak out to chat and I'll use the voice chat and I'll ask it, like, why am I thinking these things, or why is it going through? But because it has a data backlog of my discussions and everything I've already spoken about and things I've inputted into it, because it's learning about me. And again, be a caveat, be careful what you put in. Don't put in too much sensitive information about yourself, right? It's able to give me, like, sometimes I will say to it, I don't want to hear the things that I just want to hear. I want hard truths. And sometimes it will help me understand things that I'm not doing. So yeah, again, with sales and AI, like, use it to enhance what is already there rather than depend on it to do the work for you, because that's just lazy.
Yeah, I agree. There's been a lot of discussion on the podcast around good SDRs versus bad SDRs, and how for bad SDRs, potentially there will be replacements, but for good SDRs, they will utilize it to their advantage, right? So let's see what happens, but we've seen it through history that there is always an evolution. Some jobs are replaced and then some new jobs are created, and they're going to have people to feed information onto these agents, to build them, etc. So that in itself is going to be a new job. But let's see what happens with that in 6 months' time, or even 3 months' time, at the speed things are changing.
Yeah.
Let's go to the round fire, talking of speed. So the first question is, one book, podcast, or resource that's helped you lead with more kindness.
The first book that comes to mind would be David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. That book came to me when I was going through a very tough time in life. I'm not going to like read the whole book or anything like that, but David Goggins, my dude, went through hell. And like when I say, Sonia, when lots of bad things happen to you, like in a succession, this guy got hit. And like he's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he talks about mindset. And the thing that took to me in my mind was, David says, when you think you're at your lowest, or you can't push that rep at the gym, or you can't take another argument, or this dark stuff is going on in your life, you still have 40% in the tank. When you think you have nothing left, you have this 40% left in your tank, in your mind, in your body. So whenever I've come up against tough things in life or with health, I say to myself, I still got 40% left and I can still make it. And that has helped me take like steps into fear, which, has helped me progress in life. Granted, it doesn't happen overnight. It could be a couple of attempts and I fail and then I get up and I get hit. So like my mantra in life is, when the world punches you in the face, you get back up and you punch back 10 times harder, right? But with kindness. So that's definitely one book that has, helped me shape my life. And another book, again, this is for anybody that is thinking about starting their own business or, thinking about launching a company. Just before I launched Happy Selling, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yep, great book.
100%. And I've still got the business quadrant, 4-quadrant on my vision board in front of me. But simply put, sometimes people want to launch a business because they think they want to be their own boss. They want to dictate their own hours. They don't want to report to anyone. And that was the same for me. But there's a lot of other things to take into consideration of how you invest your money, how you work with, but to get out of an employee mindset. So, I butted heads with a lot of my customers and people that I freelance with of, I will never be an employee again. And even at times when my business has almost gone under, because it's been through 2 pandemics, a recession and all of that, I'm still here and I still have my business. I will never go back to being an employee, 100%, right? And a lot of my friends are like, Neil, the market's tough, like getting a job. I'm like, no, and I won't. I will take maybe an SDR manager for hire contract role, but I will not be on the payroll. But the reason why, and a lot of people may not realise this, is because it's for my son. Because I'm building a portfolio and something of wealth for him, so that when I'm not here, he has something for him later down the line. And I cannot do that as an employee because I think, and again, another moment of admission, when I was working in my last tech startup, I remember we went to our Series C and earned 50 mil. I remember like being in the office and seeing everybody celebrating and I was like, wow, this is amazing. But then something dawned on me. I was like, I'm an employee and I'm helping them make millions, but I only take a couple of K home per month. And that didn't sit with me well. So it was at that point in my life that I came across, and it wasn't I went looking for this book, I just came across it by accident, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And a year later I launched Happy Selling. So still here 8 years later, don't know what I'm doing half the time if I'm honest with you. I'm just figuring it out as I go along. And when I meet other founders, a friend of mine, they went on to the same journey, but after 8 months, they packed it in. They've gone back to getting a job. And there was this element of them feeling shame. And I said, no, you did something some people didn't even do, but maybe it's just this time round, you just need to do what's best for you. Doesn't mean you can't ever come back to this sort of stuff. And that's been the same with me. Like Happy Selling, I've either been an independent trainer, coach, whatever, but I've taken on contracts for like at least a year being a manager on paper. I'm a freelancer, but I'm still doing the same job, but on my terms. But yeah, those 2 books have definitely helped shape my mindset and career.
Thank you for sharing. The last question is, if your leadership style had a theme song, what would it be?
Ooh, say that one again.
If your leadership style had a theme song, what would it be? And no pressure, but we already have a Spotify playlist going.
Ooh, well, that's really hard because I love so many different musics. Okay, if there was one song to my... Okay, I can give it to you. So, Method Man and Mary J. Blige, You're All That I Need. That tune there is my leadership style.
I will listen to it because I don't think I know it, and I will add it to the playlist.
Cool.
Thank you. So I have a question for you from our previous guest, which says, was there an opportunity for kindness in your business that required long-term thinking? What made you bet on that kindness?
So was there a kindness that I did? That was a long time bet. Was there a kindness within my business? Yes. So when we were going through the pandemic, again, not mentioning names, I hired a professional to work on a freelance basis with me. And this was the first time when they started doing self-employed work. And what I did within that was they were going through a very hard time, and my work was what kept them busy and gave them something to focus on and also gave them an element of income. And as we went through that journey, what I shared with them was I'd be happy to help them on their journey of how to set up a business, accountants, things to think about, and all of this. And then as the relationship grew, there became a moment where I realized they weren't a fit. And I could start noticing that there wasn't as much effort put into what I was asking of and what I was paying of and what I was expecting. And I could sit there and lie because I was thinking this person needs a cash and all of this sort of stuff. But it got to the point where I was like, going back to my sales manager days, would I allow this person to be on my team, or is it going to impact revenue? And that's one side of it, but it was impacting my reach and my goal and my dream and my vision of how I want to help other people. So it was the element of having an honest conversation with that person and just saying, hey person, I'm going to take off my hat for a minute of Neil of Happy Sin. I just want to chat to you, Neil, on the level, if that's cool, right? I'm noticing some things where perhaps you're being a bit distant or things are coming in a bit late. And I know I'm not the easiest person to work with and I move at 100 miles an hour, hence why I typically work on my own. But I'm getting a gut feeling like your heart's not in for this or you don't really want to do this. And again, I wouldn't be offended if that was the case, but I'd rather know earlier on than let something drag on. And that person was just, oh yeah, Neil, I'm not liking this. I've got stuff going on in my personal life. I've realised this isn't the type of path I want to do, but I have really enjoyed doing your work. I've learnt a hell of a lot and I've taken so many notes and stuff like that. So what I agreed for that person to do was to have another month with myself, and we kind of agreed the things that we needed to get done. And I asked was like, I need you to create guides to teach me how you did what you did for me. Is that fair? And it ended very amicably. That person, I remember I bought them tickets to their favourite show and stuff like that. So the kindness was not being an asshole about it, but realising they're a human being and trying to meet them at their level. And because of them, all the content you see on LinkedIn and all my videos and graphics, it was because of that person. So they helped me learn something that I couldn't do on my own. So yeah, I think that was the one bet I took, and I think it paid off. And again, shout out to that person if you're watching. Still got love for you.
And it impacted your long-term vision as well, right? With how you wanted to get there and what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
What would be your question for the next guest?
The one question to the next... Okay, this is going to be a bit of a complicated one, right? Imagine, and it's a little bit morbid, but it's to take into the fact that of mortality, that we don't live forever, right? I would like that person to imagine that perhaps at 90 years old and they're on their deathbed and they have all of their loved ones with them, and ask them the question of, what do you think you really enjoyed in that life? And then ask yourself, you're looking back at your life, the one thing that you wish you could have let go of that didn't help you out. If you can look at that today, what would that one thing be that you can let go of to be kinder to yourself?
That's a really deep and good question. Looking forward to asking it. And Neil, the last question before we finalise this podcast is, who do you nominate for to be the next guest to the podcast? Two people.
Two people. And kind of what people are you looking for, Sonia, just so that I can give you the right people?
People that would be in the sales development space or in the founding space or solopreneurs that could add value into the kindness in business and AI piece.
All right. So one of my favourite, and again, I have lots of favourites, it's not just down to one person, but one of my favourites is a lovely gentleman who's an SDR called Henry Clayton, who works for Lego. Dude is the kindest, nicest person to work with and be inspired by. I've been his coach, and the guy has got a lot of heart, and when it comes to, being kind at work, this guy to a T, 100%. If we're thinking about somebody who perhaps gives thought leadership in the world of sales development, somebody that I would say, respect and give a lot of time. There's a lot of people, but the one person that comes to Mark is the dude. And true story, it was because of him that I declined working at LinkedIn under his advice where he worked when I met him in 2012. And he told me to go work for another startup called Zora, which was much smaller. And he said, you're going to thrive there. And he was right. And what I was happy to do was a couple of years later, most recently, helped introduce him to my sales coach and bring him on board as a coach. So that was a full circle moment. So yeah, Mark Belady, 100%.
Thank you so much for those nominations. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. And I hope that everyone watching and listening also enjoyed it. So with that said, thank you to everyone watching and listening. And I'll see you next week for another podcast. Thank you, Neil. Have an amazing rest of your week.